We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Thursday night, August 29th, 2024, as we record this new episode. And boy, the Chicago White Sox continue their death march. They are on a 7-game losing streak, all at home, by the way, and now have a 31 and 104 loss record, which puts them on pace to finish 37 and 125. A reminder that the franchise record for the Chicago White Sox for most losses in a season is 106, and that low mark is in jeopardy this weekend as the New York Mets visit the White Sox. So what's to talk about? Well, there's some good news that Nick Nastrini looks strong in his return to the White Sox rotation. Andrew Benintendi, shockingly, hit his 7th home run of the month of August. Plus, we have very exciting division races in the league. Kansas City has caught Cleveland in the American League Central. New York and Baltimore continue to seesaw in the American League East. And suddenly, the Atlanta Braves are red hot again, and they're just 5 games back of Philadelphia. And we all know about the very competitive race out in the National League West. We'll take a moment to chat about what we think on how the divisions and the wild cards could shake out in what is now the final month of Major League Baseball's regular season. But first, we have to talk about the bad that happened against the Texas Rangers. And boy, was it a painful series for Lenyn Sosa. Joining me are Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. Hello, gents. And Jim, we've had numerous discussions about Lenyn Sosa over the last 3 years and how the White Sox should handle his playing time and opportunities. After this series against Texas, not only did Sosa go 2 for 12 at the plate, but he was so bad defensively that I wonder if this series has cemented his fate with the White Sox long-term, which means he doesn't have a long-term outlook with this organization.
It seems like it should, even though that kind of sounds like an overreaction to me. Like if I'm saying that somebody is done with the White Sox, the worst team in baseball, a team that can never thoroughly bury or replace somebody on the depth charts because of just, injuries, underperformance, etc., that players always come back. It always feels hasty to say, oh, that guy's done. Like Danny Mendick, still in the organization, even though Danny Mendick has probably lived a life cycle 3 times over with the White Sox. Like he's still around, theoretically in play, could be added to the roster. Zach Remillard, same thing. So while I have that urge to say that Sosa will not be back, I think you're seeing like a pretty compelling case why it should be, just because he can really only play third base for a utility infielder profile. Like he has shown decent ability to cover first, but given the way he hits, first base is not a valuable skill for him, and no team acquiring him would say like, we need you as a first baseman. So it really comes down to the other infield positions, third, shortstop, and second. He doesn't play shortstop. Third base, like he's okay there because it seems like if he can get to a ball, like it's worth him getting to. But second base, I think we're seeing time and time again that there's just a lot of subtlety to the position, like a lot of nuance, a lot of positioning issues, a lot of like jurisdictional issues, for lack of a better word. And it would seem that like time and time again, he's in the wrong place or he's processing things out of order. And you just saw it pile up to, I guess, depending on your mindset, either distressing or infuriating or hilarious degrees over this past series with the Rangers. So you look at the way he's hitting and also just the mistakes he makes time and time again. You saw like what that did for Oscar Colas in terms of his standing in the organization. It would seem like Sosa is doing the exact same thing, just in the infield versus the outfield. And you have to wonder, like, if Brooks Baldwin right now, it looks like he's dealing with a little bit of a wrist issue. I guess we'll see what Jacob Amaya is all about, but there are some options that aren't quite ready to usurp him permanently, but once Baldwin's back or Amaya's back or whoever they want to line up can take those plate appearances, you would think that they would, just because there are no signs that he's getting used to the duties that he's being asked to fulfill.
And it's funny that you mention, because I'm with you, Jim. On the eye test, Lenyn's a better third baseman than second baseman. The person who disagrees, and it's not really a person, is StatCast. StatCast hates Lenyn Sosa at third base. StatCast has Sosa at -3 runs below average because he has no range at third base. And you mentioned that if Sosa can get to the ball at third base, he can make some plays. Sosa's arm strength is also a serious question that I have about his ability to stay at third base, as his average throwing velocity from third base is around 82 to 83 miles an hour. His max is 89 miles per hour. That's below league average for third baseman. Brooks Baldwin also has a similar issue. Throwing strength is going to be something to pay attention to with Brooks as he gets more time in the major leagues and where he's a better fit second or shortstop for the Chicago White Sox, if he is part of any conversation being someone the White Sox can rely on in 2025. But we're talking about Sosa here, and this is what, Jim, his fourth chance with the White Sox to prove himself?
I think so, at least that.
And it's not so much trying to prove himself to Grady Sizemore. It's more like, what do Chris Getz and Josh Barfield think of Lenyn Sosa? So I think you're right. In the end, Sosa's just going to be part of the organization. He's going to get a ton of playing time in Charlotte. Maybe he will hunt down all of the hitting records with the Charlotte Knights, chase all those Jordan Dinks records down there, and that's probably what his future outlook is with the Chicago White Sox. But it's just not clicking for Lenyn Sosa in the major leagues, even though he is just 24 years old. And James, as Jim mentioned, that there could be some possibilities or other opportunities for others to maybe spell time for Lenyn Sosa at second base, or when they don't want to play Miguel Vargas at third base. Are we stuck watching Sosa for most of September, or are we going to see a run of new White Sox, Jacob Amaya?
So I think it's not, I don't see like an immediate displace with Sosa, because Brooks Baldwin was getting checked out today, and it seems like he was wearing a brace post game, expecting it. The initial thing is maybe a few days, but we could see that linger in a way where it doesn't seem like you can immediately count him as being your immediate infield depth for the weekend. So that's a complicating factor. They place Nicky Lopez on waivers today, or at least it's active until we should be some resolution about whether he went unclaimed by Saturday. I would say it's probably unlikely he gets claimed, but that's another reason why you can't really say get out of here and rage DFA somebody from their infield depth. I do think he's not going to be in limbo long term, because he's out of options next spring, and he can no longer really fill this role of bouncing up and down, which is kind of his main utility to them, is available.
Wow, I did not know that Sosa's already out of options.
Yeah, they've gone this bouncing up and down dance with him for aggressively.
Yeah, this would be his sixth chance.
Good Lord. I feel bad for him. You're 24 years old and you're out of options.
Well, some people view being out of options from a player perspective as a positive thing, especially if you think you're repeatedly not getting a long window to really prove yourself with an organization that maybe hasn't developed you that great. So yeah, I've definitely talked to players who have been happy about being out of options because they do not like the AAA Major League yo-yo, and I imagine Lenyn and his group see it more that way than what a tragedy. But as you recall, the first time we had this play Lenyn Sosa or not debate, Tony La Russa was still the manager, and it was viewed as him not really giving him real run when there was the most optimism about his bat breaking out. There hasn't really, there's never been some point where I think the front office has been all in on really giving him run. It's always been more of a, hey, maybe let's see this as a necessity. And then even then kind of souring on the project, after 3 or 4 weeks and not really getting the window you would give like a top prospect to prove themselves. I think it kind of speaks to how dire things are right now, that we're kind of suffering through what's obviously not great defense from him, on top of the fact that you'd think it's the way they're talking about him and the way they're putting him in the lineup that he's kind of a bright spot offensively. He's got a sub 500 OPS this month. It's been looking like one of his slumps. He's definitely had periods where he struck the ball kind of with authority a couple times this year where it's like, yeah, why not? This is better than when you're rolling out. But that's not really the case right now. And certainly Jacob Amaya's offensive ceiling is not high. He'll tell you to your face about his lack of power. But at least in terms of steady middle infield defense, which he's supposed to have, and at least like a hit tool and a good approach, which that's the thing that's kind of fallen apart for Sosa in the major leagues. I would think you want to give him some run at some point. But at the same time, he's been here 3 days. They played a doubleheader and he didn't play either side of it. They didn't treat him like somebody that they're particularly eager to use. And kind of the fact that he took Brian Ramos's roster spot so that Brian Ramos can continue to play every day at AAA speaks to them kind of thinking of him as somebody who they're not bothered by sitting on a little bit. So yeah,
he truly is the new Nick Senzel.
Right. Even took his locker and it's a similar haircut. So you'd think that why not see what you have? Why not explore this? This is a prospect that at least was of higher renown than Sosa ever was across the league. And I thought we were trying out stall Dodgers prospects. I thought that was what the whole project was. Right here, we had one start on the mound and at third base, both on today, and went okay. So I would think you'd turn to Amaya, but as much as you hear talk about them trying to trade Sosa or get something of value from him off season, we're not seeing them kind of move on from him in some way with gusto. I mean, I get that there's a lack of depth, and I get that Danny Mendick hit just as bad while he's up here, but you would think that they would, at least with Amaya kind of there, start exploring what they have a bit more for someone who really doesn't have just a tangible way to be a factor next year, simply in terms of options. Even if you like him as a depth bat or think he's going to grow into utility profile at some point, he can't keep operating in this form. So why not explore someone who can have a bigger role next year?
That's a good point, James, because, Jim, we're going to have the Sox Machine Offseason Plan Project. And I think for our readers, listeners, before the season even began, they were looking ahead to the 2025 Sox Machine Offseason Plan Project, moving on from the salaries of Yohan Makata and Eloy Jimenez and further money being dropped off, that offseason plan project would be a lot more interesting than what we all went through in 2024. And, fingers crossed, Colson Montgomery, Brian Ramos, that's easy. That's league minimum. They take up 2 starting spots. But here we are rolling into September, counting on Colson Montgomery and Brian Ramos to be your starting left side of the infield is now incredibly risky and borderline crazy to even think about. Lenyn Sosa doesn't look like a solution at second base. We still have some questions regarding Brooks Baldwin. We just need more games to watch him, whether that's at shortstop or second base. The Miguel Vargas experience hasn't been great as well. Again, there's one more month left in the season, but there's only one more month left of this season for guys to play games, for Chris Getz to get a better feel of what kind of team he's going to have to try to reconfigure this upcoming offseason. It felt like before this season, the White Sox had to start over again in the middle infield. going to 2025, is that going to be the same case again? Is this just a repeat of we have no idea on who's going to be up the middle for the White Sox?
Yeah, it reminds me of something James wrote about when Getz was talking about like how all this losing could actually be really good, or at least they could spin it in a positive way by saying that when you are this historically awful, it can serve as an impetus for greater change and transformation, and maybe convincing some higher ups, or maybe one higher up in particular, that things need to change, and maybe, there needs to be more investment in things off the field to try to avoid such a dearth of talent. But James also wrote like that, you can say that, but also just there is a golden opportunity here when you have a team that's this bad, and just you look up and down lineup, you don't see anybody who's making great use of it. All of the playing time, you have like all these positions that are just open for somebody to grab them, and nobody really is. Like Dominic Fletcher's been okay, but not an impactful player. Like I guess his defense is that, but offensively, he's just kind of settling for singles right now. So like, is he going to be somebody you hand a lineup spot to unquestioned? Doesn't seem like it. Andrew Benintendi, I guess it's good that he's showing some pop just to be able to like feel better about the money that he's being paid the next 3 years, and maybe not have to worry about like, do you DFA him or do you just trade him for nothing? Right now, just a matter of like holding on to him and hoping that he stays healthy and just provide some credibility somewhere. Like Luis Robert seems like he's just kind of playing out the string. Brooks Baldwin seems like he's trying to keep his head above water. Like nobody's really doing anything in his positions where you can feel like you can write him in for next year aside from the veterans. So, it's been weird to me watching Montgomery struggle for most of the year and just kind of running in place and wondering like, when is the greater conversation going to change? Because he was still treated, I think, among the prospect casuals, or people who just kind of maybe check the rankings once every or twice a year, and saying, oh, Montgomery's a prospect, when is he going to be called up? And just looking at his performance and saying like, man, he's not turning around AAA pitching. When's he going to be, why would you expect him to do better against major league pitching? And finally that seems to be changing in terms of like the stuff that James got from Cam sites are talking about, like the swing changes that need to be made, or the approach changes at the plate to compensate for like a body type that isn't agreeing with the way he previously swung the bat. There are a lot of questions about Montgomery, and I think that's really just kind of sets all these other dominoes in motion in terms of like, well, if he's not exciting and Caro's out, then what's the next wave looking like? And right now, aside from Ramos, maybe there isn't a next wave.
That's a very scary outlook, but a correct one. I'm with you, Jim. And I think you also make a good point. A lot of these guys are getting opportunities like Lenyn Sosa. They got to take advantage of this and show that they're major league worthy. And so many on the White Sox currently are proving, forget about the win-loss record. They're just proving that they're not major league quality players. And in my point of view, they should not even be part of any conversation in the 2025 roster, but they will be, because on one hand, Jerry Reinsdorf can complain that we cannot be the worst team in baseball again, but is he going to drastically raise payroll for Chris Getz to get some interesting position player free agents to fix these issues?
No, just want to pipe in there. No, that is not what's going to happen.
No.
Or fire Chris Getz and actually do a search for a new GM? Probably not either.
No, he won't be doing that either. So even though the Lenyn Sosa experience has not been fun, and even though I'm kind of over watching Lenyn Sosa, I think we're going to be continuing to see Lenyn Sosa, and hopefully he can change our minds with a stronger September than what we have seen in August, and especially in this past series against the Rangers.
Does Lenyn Sosa qualify as fun bad?
No.
Okay.
You got to do something. You got to do one thing well in order to be fun bad. Daniel Palka was fun bad. Daniel Palka hit homers. He was bad at literally everything else. I don't know what Lenyn Sosa. I don't know what Lenyn Sosa does well. Get hit in the face by throws coming down from the catcher. Poor guy. That had to hurt like hell.
Does second half Benintendi like fit your definition? Because he's kind of a homer first player right now.
That's a good example.
The new Daniel
Andrew
Palka.
Benintendi. That'd be hilarious. Andrew, we need you to be less of yourself and more like Daniel Palka.
Be like the boy.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
Well, let's talk about something positive that happened for the White Sox in this series, and that is Nick Nastrini making his return, stepping in, pitching the Thursday afternoon game, and Nastrini was very good against the Rangers. 98 pitches. He generated 51 swings, 17 whiffs, so that's a whip percentage at 33%. That's good. His final line, 6 innings, only 3 hits allowed. One of them was a solo home run. That was the only run he allowed. 1 walk, that's key, and 3 strikeouts. Here's what interim manager Grady Sizemore and White Sox starting pitcher Nick Nastrini had to say about his Thursday start.
I thought Nick was great. He threw well. He kept us in that game, very competitive. Just did a great job today. I was really impressed. I think we were hoping that it would go good for him and he'd feel good out there, and he exceeded the expectation. I thought today he had really good command of his off-speed stuff. I thought he did a good job of just keeping them off balance, mixing in a lot of off-speed stuff, and just had a good feel for that slider. Kept him off the heater, kept him guessing, and just, he competed. He looked comfortable, just threw great for us. Yeah.
Able to execute pitches when I needed to. Got to a couple of 3-2 counts, but I was able to execute a slider a couple times, and then fastball command was a lot better. So had some misses, but I was able to get it in the zone for the most part. Just cleaning up my delivery a little bit. There were some things that I identified that I needed to work on, and just honing in on that, and then also honing in on being able to execute the fastball to the bottom and the top of the zone. Use it to get back in the counts.
And James, the mechanical tweak that you wrote about on Sox Machine regarding Nastrini and his back foot. The location of that back foot is helping with the fastball. But against the Rangers, looking at the data from Baseball Savant, he still was very slider heavy against the Rangers. Is that going to be the idea moving forward for Nastrini? Is that he's always going to be slider first and fastball second in the majors?
His slider is better than his fastball, I think. I think that's also a true of our current the pitching direction of the organization, is that you have both Katz and Bannister who would rather throw more off-speed pitches if they can. So if he's commanding his fastball well enough to tunnel his slider off of that much, and really that's, Nastrini explains that tunnel-wise, his curveball matches up with the high fastball and the slider matches up with the low fastball. If he's commanding those quadrants in the way that he can use them as much as he wants, and it's kind of location specific for both, I think he's going to chase what works. And he was, even though he only had 3 strikeouts today, the swinging strike rate was kind of in line with what makes him kind of exceptional throughout. Because even as he was looking really bad in Charlotte, he was still sporting a 15% swinging strike rate that was near the top of the International League. So it was very much someone a way that we can now quantify this guy's stuff still is really good while he's being terrible. Because previously, when you hear starters hitting your head at the wall, you do I feel in the early 2000s we did just thought of as scouting BS, but now we have a way to numerize it, and Nastrini's kind of performed in that aspect consistently throughout. So as long as he's not taking the form of he's walking tons of people because he's just going to slider over and over again because it's the only thing he trusts, even when he needs a strike, or he's getting hammered because he's predictable. I think 40 sliders. I think that's a Katz and Bannister's kind of platonic ideal for him, for Davis Martin. I bet they probably don't want to see Jonathan Cannon. They probably are happier when he has starts where his changeup is at least the plurality. So there's not really a Michael Kopech or Dylan, even Dylan Cease became slider heavy, but a Michael Kopech type in the rotation where you expect them, or Carlos Rodon, where you really expect them to kind of throw 60-70% fastballs at this point. And talking to the Bannisters over this weekend, that's not what Noah Schultz is going to be either. So we might see our last guy who really looks like that for a little bit.
But then
maybe Grant.
How do you explain the Garrett Crochet then? Is then the cutter different from the
I forgot about him. Crochet is a guy who definitely has like that four seamer, like really plays at a special degree. I think that's kind of the bar of where you'd see a White Sox starter really use a fastball that much, where it's just really this clearly dominant pitch that's like superlative on its own and gets those results. But I think Crochet would probably be a guy where it's really interesting to see what he looks like 2 seasons from now. Maybe in a Dodger uniform, but still, like, does he like the way that when Giolito was really great in 20, God, how long was it ago? That 2019, where you see a lot of this fastball changeup starts, or the hilarious, like, 11 changeups in a row stretch against the Tigers in 2020 that he had. I would not be surprised if like 2-3 years out you didn't see Garrett Crochet like throwing a changeup a lot more, or mixing up 2 different speeds of breaking balls a lot more and using the sweeper in some other fashion that he has to counter. But I think right now, with the way his fastball plays and the way the cutter plays, like, he's kind of unique, but they don't have a ton. And, we'll see what Taylor's like numbers and how his fastball plays as it gets to the upper levels, but it's hard to think of like the other prospects really being oriented that way. That's not Kai Bush. That's not Mason Adams. I feel like Jairo Uriarte will probably be a slider heavy guy too, especially with like the way Bannister talks about like accepting him as maybe a high walk, high strikeout guy if they can really get him going. I feel like pitching backwards, so to speak, or jabbing with the fastball, the way they phrase it, I feel like that's going to be the new normal around here.
Hagen Smith.
I mean, his fastball is really good, but he's also a guy like I feel like we could see throwing 50-50 sliders as well. So remains to be seen. I guess he gets comped a lot to Rodon, and that dude became psycho about throwing fastballs all the time. So it remains to be seen.
There was a lot of starts I saw this year of Hagen Smith that he was about 50-50 with fastball sliders. So he's comfortable throwing sliders for a striker. At least he was this year in his very dominant college season. We'll see how it goes in the minor leagues. But no, that was really interesting. Good stuff, James. We would be remiss talking and recapping this White Sox Rangers series if we didn't mention that the White Sox were like a foot away from winning the second game of Wednesday's doubleheader, thanks to Travis Jankowski robbing Andrew Vaughn of a walk-off home run. A phenomenal catch by Jankowski. I mean, it was great to watch on TV. I'm sure I was in the stands. I couldn't believe it. It was just a phenomenal play. I know, James, you had a great view of it as well. Jim, is Jankowski's play catch of the year so far? At least in White Sox games, but also in major leagues?
As Hawk Harrelson might say, under the circumstances, probably. There was a play Parker Meadows made against the Mariners a few weeks ago where he robbed a homer. I think it was going to go ahead homer against the Mariners, but it was in the 8th inning. And it was more of a standard, well-timed leap at the center field wall, bringing a catch back from over the wall, but like a standing leap and the glove meeting the ball before it fell over the fence. Like Jankowski, I think what made his like especially impressive was like the extra notch of athleticism of him timing it, using the wall for extra leverage. I think Steve Stone, like I don't know how many times he said it, probably 5 or 6 times, talked about him angling his body for additional extension. And I think Stone, when you hear him really rave about something and you hear him like extol the virtues of a play or a player over and over again, I think that tends to mean something in terms of like, if you impress Steve Stone, who is hard to impress, like I think he's somebody who points out good play, but in terms of somebody who doesn't really rave, he speaks more of, I think, in a detached manner about how guys do things. When you wow him, I think that adds a degree of like, oh, that must really be something. If this is the 5th time he's talked about Jankowski angling his body for extra extension and really bringing the ball back. So yeah, there was a catch that Lo Perfido made in right field at Target Field where he kind of did a Dwayne Wise juggling thing, but that wasn't bringing a home run back because that was like the tall wall in right field. That was more just taking a double away and the extra coordination of catching a ball with your bare hand while falling to the ground. Some diving catches that I think, are maybe hard to square up. I think Cedric Mullins made a really cool one in the left center gap where he just, full extension, full speed, the really kind of beautiful diving catch you see. But in terms of like home run robberies and leverage, I think Jankowski has that one beat for just like knowing exactly how many runs it cost, because it would have been a 6-4 White Sox win. Instead, they lost 4-3.
Yeah, it saved the game for the Texas Rangers. Definitely did. A phenomenal catch.
Piece of it was Benintendi was on second as a tying run, but they were still pretty deep. I even had it described as like no doubles defense. So I don't know if like Duke Ellis is on second base if they're playing like that deep, because Jankowski really has like a lot of time to track along the wall and really kind of load up for what he's going to do. He's not in a dead sprint, just straight back. And I wonder if they just like kind of didn't want the inning to blow up bigger, because like, obviously they lose if they give up 2 runs as opposed to just tie, or they were just not worried about the speed of being a little bit deeper. Or has Vaughn just been so good in August that they're I know it was like over 870 OPS going into that night that they played that, but it seemed like everything was set up to give them that actual edge. And it reminded me, because Vaughn was tracking like a back foot slider that was coming into him. It looked so like, even though obviously it wasn't as far because that other ball was like halfway up the concourse, it looked like the swing against the Rays game that he walked off last year.
Oh, yes.
But because everything is 2 degrees worse in 2024, it like barely is clearing the wall instead of like a no doubter that finally frees them from this this horror that they're in. But in 2024 there is no escape. There is no secret passage out of the dungeon.
Well, you mentioned Andrew Benintendi, and Benintendi hit a solo home run in Thursday's loss. That gives him 15 for the season. Benintendi has 7 home runs in the month of August and now is tied with Andrew Vaughn for most with the current White Sox hitters. That's the key phrase, current, because Paul DeJong hit 18 homers with the White Sox. Technically, Paul DeJong is still leading the White Sox in home runs hit. So, gentlemen, simple question. Who's going to win the White Sox home run title? Paul DeJong with 18, Benintendi and Vaughn, they both have 15, and Luis Robert Jr. has 14. Who is your pick to click, James, in winning the White Sox home run title at the end of the season?
I've been shading optimistic this season in so many ways where I feel like it's burned me. Maybe just everything I predicted feels overly optimistic given what I've watched. I'm tired of being optimistic. I'm tired of being burnt. Paul DeJong is your 2024 White Sox home run champion.
All right, I like it. How about you, Jim? Who's your pick?
You're stealing a post idea that I have in the next few days.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm trying not to tilt the scales as I put this out there. But what's funny is like you're seeing Benintendi, you have the surge, you're seeing Vaughn catch relative fire, but like Luis Robert Jr. is there at 14 as well. And you're just not really hearing much about him in like terms of, he's just kind of coasting along. He's just kind of there. So maybe I'll say him as my, like, he should be leading this team in homers. I do feel like if you're trying to figure out like the most cursed outcome, or just like kind of like how Yoan Moncada was among the position player war leaders, even though he hadn't played since April 11th, I kind of look for that outcome. Like, what would be the most embarrassing in retrospect to say, like, just fun facts are the opposite of fun facts for this White Sox team, and Paul DeJong leading the team in homers would be that. But maybe I'll throw a dollar in the Luis Robert Jr. bucket just because, like, it seems like it should be the case. And that would be, I guess, the obvious one of just, like, oh yeah, he should be good for like a 5 homer week at some point. That kind of puts him over the top. And, leads the team with an unimpressive total, but not really showing it as of late.
I'm going to go with Andrew Benintendi. I'm going to stick with the hot hand. I think Benintendi hits 4 in the month of September and finishes with 19, which would be a lot for Andrew Benintendi. But I don't think any White Sox hitter gets to 20 homers in 2024, which, boy, is really, really embarrassing. And another thing that the White Sox will have to work on this offseason is to find more power.
No, what's embarrassing is if you had like a article with The Athletic where you asked a bunch of scouts around the league the likelihood of Luis Robert or Eloy Jimenez hitting 300 homers or even 500 homers in their career, and all of them taking it very seriously, and now they're both 27 and neither are at 100 yet. That would be embarrassing.
Luis Robert Jr. has 88 homers. So, like, perhaps
nice.
that's
his,
Match the number. Just stop there. Why not?
I mean, that's a leading theory now. a leading theory I just thought of.
This series preview segment is sponsored by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. With the New York Mets coming into town, great seats are still available. Saturday night is a hot ticket with the Frank Thomas MVP bobblehead night. Even though the White Sox are not very good, you can take advantage by buying 300-level suite tickets starting at $45 a seat for this series, which is a great deal. Also use Game Time for other sporting events like the Chicago Bears. Opening kickoff against Tennessee is on Sunday, September 8th. That's rapidly approaching, and tickets are scarce to see Caleb Williams' NFL debut. If you decide at the last minute to grab tickets, make sure to use Game Time. Again, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Well, the New York Mets now visit the Chicago White Sox this weekend, and the Mets, just like many teams in contention, need this series against the White Sox. The Mets are above 500. They're 70-64, but they're still 8.5 games back of Philadelphia, and they're 3.5 games back of the National League wild card, the last spot, which currently goes to their division rival, the Atlanta Braves. The Mets have been a good road team this year. They're 35-31 away from Queens. In their last 10 games, the Mets are 6-4, but they lost their last game. The pitching problems for this series: Friday night, 7:10 p.m. Central Time start. Tyler McGill against Jonathan Cannon. Saturday night, I'm going to give you guys a heads up. It is Frank Thomas bobblehead day for his back-to-back MVP awards. I don't know how many fans are going to be in the seats, but because you have to be older than 21 years old to get this bobblehead technically, the gates will be packed early. So if you want a bobblehead, make sure to show up early to get that bobblehead. That is your public service announcement. I'm not saying you have to stick for the game. Stay around for the game. If you just want the bobblehead, show up when the gates open and to make sure that you get your bobblehead. For that game, if you do decide to stick around, it's old friend Jose Quintana against the Dart, Davis Martin. And then Sunday afternoon, an interesting pitching matchup, Sean Manaea against Garrett Crochet. And speaking of Crochet, James, that's kind of where I want to start. The White Sox are hinting that Crochet could be shut down sooner than later. Could Sunday be Crochet's last of the 2024 season?
I don't think so, based on what Garrett said the other day, that he's talked with Getz and that he's emphasized the importance of pitching through the end of the year. I think they would kind of need a bigger reason, especially like having his last start canceled. Obviously for the White Sox, like, you're starting to lose the incentive of demonstrating he's healthy longer and start worrying about, like, are we really going to see like our big trade asset hurt in some meaningless game? And I think if you're Garrett, like, why do you care? You're trying to build innings. You're trying to really, you have your last 2 years of arbitration coming up where you want to basically make as many starts and produce as much as possible. And, you know, you have arbitration coming up this winter. You want to up your numbers as much as possible. So I think if he's not showing signs of wear or decline, I think he has a pretty good argument for saying that he can keep going and keep making abbreviated starts. At the same time, like, I think 150 was probably both sides' idea of an absolute ceiling as far as what he could do, what was a reasonable goal going into this year. So maybe if he hits that, that's kind of a thing. But right now, I think that everything's kind of indicating that they're going to keep going unless something hiccup pops up. They certainly don't have a lot of starters to throw in his way. You have Kai like actively wearing down as an alternative. You maybe like you consider Jairo Uriarte, but he's as part of your September call-ups, but he's way past any previous career highs he's had in innings. So I think if you do, maybe it's more of a, in the Bannister mold of trying out a starting pitching prospect in the bullpen. You just don't have like this very great obvious depth cases unless like you're really enthused about finally rewarding Johan Dominguez, and even then you probably don't do that for 40-man reasons. So I think they kind of keep chugging along. I certainly don't think like this weekend's the end of it, but you hear a lot of things, and certainly the White Sox have incentive to kind of say like, all right, that's enough. We've seen enough when, if anything, hiccup kind of happens.
Yeah, looking at the calendar, the most starts that Crochet can make before the end of the season is 6 more. If he averages 4 innings per of those 6 starts, that's 24 innings. That pushes him to 152 innings for the season over 33 starts. Something that stuck up on me, Jim, Crochet's at 180 strikeouts. Like, he's got a chance in September if he gets the ball every 5th day and games don't get rained out on him in a minute into the game and 4 pitches into the game, that he can get to 200 strikeouts this season. I knew he was piling up strikeouts, but I did not know that he was that close to an in-season milestone.
Yeah, I was tracking that for a while, and then like when he got limited to 4 innings and was having trouble, seemed like negotiating either the intensity level or the approach, and looking like to get contact because he wanted to get through innings as quickly as possible and maybe give him a shot of like pitching 5, pitching 6 under a pitch count. And it seems like that 4 inning limit's pretty sticky. It does seem like he's back to missing bats and being somebody who's like used to pitching under these restrictions and not necessarily having it in front of mind so much. So yeah, I think probably 5 starts, 4 to 5 strikeouts per, like if he were to last under this current routine for the entire season, seems like he's a decent bet to get there.
I think it also helps with conversations this offseason as a selling point that, hey, look at the strikeout rate that Crochet was able to produce, and we were able to get him to 30 starts. So if we could do it, you guys should be able to. So now send over your top prospects, position players, please.
You think it'd be better pitch than Getch just completely saying like, how can Crochet be used however they want? How do I care?
Yeah, great sales pitch, Chris. Great sales pitch. The White Sox will be facing 2 lefties this weekend. And again, Quintana and Minaya, which this is kind of a homecoming for Minaya. A reminder, he's from Valparaiso, Indiana. So for all the Northwest Indiana folks, there you go. He's one of yours. The White Sox this year, not a shocker. Worse than Major League Baseball facing lefties. They're hitting .224 with a .284 on base percentage and slugging .330. So that is a .614 OPS. We just saw the White Sox team really struggle to score runs against the Texas Rangers. Jim, are the White Sox going to score more than 6 runs this weekend?
I'm going to say no. Or I think 6, I think 6 feels like a top. And just one thing I was looking at with the Mets is that when you look at their last 10 games, they're 6-4. But when you look at the teams they played, 3 against the Orioles, 4 against the Padres, 3 against the Diamondbacks, winning a series against the Diamondbacks, who have been the hottest team in baseball in Arizona. Like, they're playing good baseball. And it's funny, like, they're one of the teams I would say that I have no idea how they're doing at any given time based on the rhetoric among the reporters and fans, blogs, etc., following them. Like, I have no idea how the Mets are doing. They could be 10-0, right. They could be 0-10. There's always like a level of amusement and alarm that kind of just, they shift based on how they're playing slightly, but there's always there's never like excessive optimism around the Mets. But when you look at like the opponents they're playing and what those opponents have to play for, because all of those games are important for those 3 teams, like they've been playing pretty well. So when you look at like Orioles, Padres, Diamondbacks, and then White Sox, I wonder, it has the makings of like the classic trap series where like all of a sudden, there might be a little bit of that LOL Mets and them just pulling the rug out from under them a little bit and causing some classic back page tabloid panic with the White Sox taking 2 of 3, but also like the White Sox look really out of it. And basically all it takes is like one terrible inning or one reliever who's pitching out of order because of who was used the previous day for everything to come tumbling down. One Lenyn Sosa mistake. And if Baldwin has a brace on his wrist and the White Sox don't want to play Amaya because he would be the 60th player used by the White Sox this season, and they want to keep that number starting with the 5 for as long as possible, then yeah, it could be more of the same. So let's say 6 runs, and they top out at that.
We're going to get destroyed by that end of the season Sporkle quiz of naming every White Sox player that appeared in a game in 2024. If you guys get all 60 right, you cheated. You and Baseball Reference opened another window. And as I mentioned in the intro, the franchise record for losses in a single season is 106. The White Sox are at 104. If they get swept, they're going to break that record this weekend. James, the White Sox set a new low mark in front of their faithful fans.
Probably, man. They're really bad. What was the record after the All-Star break? 4-35 or something?
I haven't looked. I'm afraid to look like, what the record is after the All-Star break. I'm afraid to look at what the record is after the trade deadline.
White Sox brain rot, and I shouldn't give into it. But I know you're supposed to see a future core in your prospect system, but the disappointment with Colson Montgomery, maybe he's only a solid regular instead of a star. A solid regular would immediately be the best hitter on this team. A 700 OPS, an empty 700 OPS. Oh my God, he's batting third every day. We have commenters poo-pooing I think Brian Ramos would be a positive WAR player, but I don't think he'll see a star. Oh my God, can he be here tomorrow? What are you talking about? We're watching the worst team of all time. And, a 65 win team is going to feel amazing. You know, the fond memories I've been having thinking of just the 2017 White Sox. They didn't even come close to winning losing 100 games. That team was awesome. So yeah, I don't like where they're at right now. I'm bearish on them for this weekend. You think they should be able to win a game, and then some guy literally climbs a wall and stops it, even when things break right for them. Yeah, probably a sweep. I don't know. Pitching matchups don't look good.
Yeah, the negative way to put it is the White Sox are 4-33 in the second half. The positive way to put it is they've won more games in August than July.
Hey!
4-3.
Progress.
They had multiple 9 and 19 months where it's just this is horrible. They're getting their ass kicked. And it's just if they could somehow recover that pace again, they'd avoid the all-time loss record. But it's nowhere. It's out of their ass right now. Move the next segment.
7-42. 7-42 in July and August.
Yeesh. Well, we saw every game, so it's been fun. What a fun ride.
It's 1 out of every 7 games.
Yeah. If they get swept, that's their third 10-game losing streak of the season. I'm just going to assume that's a record. That no team has had 3 or more 10-game losing streaks in a season. Separate.
White Sox team.
Well, that's the Chicago White Sox. Let's move on away from the White Sox talk as we end this show and take a look around Major League Baseball as division races and the wild card races are getting very tight as we enter the last month of the regular season. Yes, a month from now, we'll be heading into the postseason. And this conversation starts with the American League Central. We had this conversation a few podcasts ago in who we like to win the division. And I was a little bullish on the Kansas City Royals because they own the tiebreaker over the Cleveland Guardians, and they won that big series against the Guardians in Cleveland. And now the Royals are just 1 game back of Cleveland in the American League Central. So the Guardians are 76-58, the Royals are 75-59, and 3.5 games back of Cleveland. The Minnesota Twins at 72-61. And it happened. The one thing I asked not to happen has totally happened. Cleveland owns a tiebreaker over the Minnesota Twins. Kansas City owns a tiebreaker over Cleveland. And Minnesota owns a tiebreaker over Kansas City. This is rock, paper, scissors when it comes to tiebreakers. And the Guardians have 3 more games against Kansas City. They're at Kansas City next week after Labor Day, the 2nd through the 4th, and they have a 4-game series at home against the Minnesota Twins from September 16th to the 19th. So we'll have more clarity on the American League Central maybe next week or definitely in a couple of weeks with that critical series between the Twins and the Guardians. So I'll ask you, James, since the White Sox drive you crazy, how are you feeling about the American League Central now? Do you think Kansas City's got enough gas to drive past Cleveland, or are you still sticking with your notion of the Minnesota Twins should be better than this? They should still win the division.
Ugh. I feel like my conception of what is a traditional power team has gone back and forth between the White Sox and the Twins the last 5 years, and it's always been wrong. No matter which one I picked, I need to stop trying to make sense and give into the chaos. So yeah, sure, the Royals. I don't know. Paul DeJong is going to have a 900 OPS for the rest of the year. Nothing makes sense anymore.
Is he on your fantasy team?
No, he's not. Not that that's stopping us for a second, but I never had Paul. I don't know how Paul. Who has Paul? The torque pickup I did when Christian Walker went down. Boy, I don't know. I can't really speak to what inklings I had that he might have a good week, but boy, did he have a good week. Just kind of felt it coming. I don't know, whatever reason. But yeah, our ability to find useful depth has served us well as the injuries piled up a little bit down the stretch. Not saying I have any particular formula for who to stream on a short notice, but I have ways of looking at the schedule and seeing some answers, finding some solutions.
It'd be hilarious if you lose the championship because Paul DeJong goes on a heater.
But DeJong can't play the White Sox, so there's that.
Yeah, there's that. There you go.
I don't know if that would have an effect. I don't know if that's something to watch from a fantasy standpoint. But it's an interesting observation, Jim. Great job.
How about you, Jim? Who do you like so far in the Central in the last month of the season?
Well, every time I want to count the Twins because whether it's because of just how they haven't pressed a financial advantage when they looked like they had the division in their hands, or whether it's because I don't think Rocco Baldelli's that good of a problem solver. I want to count them out, and then they come back and they look like, oh yeah, Byron Buxton's good, Royce Lewis is good. They have enough pitching, they have enough ability to kind of create relievers and shore up a bullpen. And even if they're not the best at anything, they're just a well-rounded team, and their top end talent carries them over. So that's why I don't want to count them out. But I do like the idea of the Royals, a team being rewarded for adding both in the offseason and at the deadline. The Guardians were strangely quiet. The Twins really couldn't get anything done. I think they DFA'd their only addition that they made at the deadline, Trevor Richards. He's out. So their one big idea, you kind of like the Eniel De Los Santos of the Minnesota Twins, just said yeah, we don't like him that much, and letting him go. Whereas you're seeing the Royals with DeJong, that working out perfectly for them and giving them exactly what they need is infield depth at third base. And I guess he's playing a good third base too, which he didn't do with the White Sox. A whole lot of things going in DeJong's direction that were not. DeJong hit homers for the White Sox. That was certainly in his arsenal, but everything else, not so much, and is right now with the Royals. So perhaps they are being rewarded for just a team that has been looking to add both over the winter and at the deadline in a way that the others weren't. And it would be cool to see that rewarded. They're getting a lot out of Bobby Witt Jr. They're getting an absurd amount out of him, and that always makes me nervous. All it takes is one wrong step until then all of a sudden their identity is a little bit up in the air. But along the lines of the same thing like Buxton, when Buxton could carry the Twins, and then all of a sudden he hits a wall, or he pulls up lame, or just slides weirdly into a base, and their identity is gone. That's my, a little bit of an apprehension with putting all of the eggs in the Bobby Witt Jr. basket, but he's been extremely durable so far. So I think as long as there hasn't been that injury, you probably trust that a little bit, and maybe just their ability to keep adding arms and keep adding bats just to kind of shore up whatever they can shore up. We'll see if they add anybody at the waiver deadline, but I would like to see that rewarded, because I like when teams and front offices actually do try to make their teams better versus make their teams adequate and hope that winning percentages or wild card races break their way.
They could add Nicky Lopez.
Yeah, there you go. Nicky Lopez.
Yeah. Tommy Pham.
Take them all. Robbie Grossman.
Yes. Just triple down on former White Sox.
The formula everyone's longing to replicate.
The bad news for Kansas City and Minnesota is that Cleveland's got 3 more games against the White Sox on the road in Chicago. Like, that makes a difference. The Tigers also have 3 more games against the White Sox. The Tigers are above 500. They're 68 and 67. So the American League Central was deemed to be the worst in Major League Baseball thanks to the White Sox. The American League Central has 4 teams above 500 right now. And the Tigers are 8.5 games back. They're 5 games back of the wild card. But the Minnesota Twins are 2-8 in their last 10. The Tigers are 7-3. So something to keep an eye on. If the Tigers can shrink the gap between them and the Minnesota Twins, which means the Tigers get themselves closer to the wild card in the American League, but they're very much a long shot, even though they do have 3 more games against the White Sox. Over in the American League East, it's been Yankees, Orioles all season long. And it just seems like these are the 2 juggernauts this year in the American League. One team is going to end up winning the East and probably have the number 1 seed in the American League. And the runner-up, probably by a game, is going to end up being the 4th seed and will have to start on the road if they win their series in the wildcard round against their division foe on the road in the 5-game division series. So it's really critical for either the Yankees or the Orioles to win this division. James, who do you like between the Yankees and Orioles to win out the marathon?
I guess I'm leaning Yankees just because the Orioles are dealing with a lot of injuries and a lot of plan B. And I don't want to transfer all my skepticism to them, maybe over-reliant on Eloy Jimenez, whose power hasn't really come back. But yeah, that definitely factors in my thinking. Not that the Yankees don't have problems of their own, but it just seems like they have 2 kind of MVP caliber bats going off and a bit more, not like, I don't want to overstate like how good Stroman or Rodon have been because they've both been shaky in the second half, but it just feels like what the Orioles have tried to do at the deadline has gone a bit more haywire, though I just remembered Daniel De Los Santos. So maybe I'd eat my words. I don't know. Seems like a bit of a toss-up. But I guess I'd lean Yankees. They have the advantage already. They're still doing weird things. They're still running DJ LeMahieu out there and Alex Verdugo like way too often. And maybe they'll never move off that, whereas the Orioles seem a bit more willing to shuffle through things that aren't working. So now I've gone and talked myself into the Orioles. Go O's! They got it, baby.
How about you, Jim? Who do you like in the East?
I'm leaning towards the Yankees just because when you look at their lineup, you do have like the centerpieces who are, maybe 1 or 2, 1 or 3 in the MVP race with Bobby Witt Jr. in the middle. So like that goes a long way. And then Torres looks like he's starting to pick it up a little bit in terms of being like somebody who can get on base, be somebody to drive in, turn the lineup over, that sort of guy. So like, I think there might be enough there to, support the pitching staff, whereas like the Orioles are going through, like they just lost Jorge Mateo, like they just keep shedding parts, like non-essential parts. Like their core is still intact, their offense is still very good, they're still very creative when it comes to covering innings and getting by, and like it's a solid foundation, I think, or like a solid just structure they have, culture, if you will. I think that's what culture looks like if you're going back to that conversation with the White Sox, like being able to plug and play, next man up, and getting adequate performances, but also putting guys in a position to succeed, not asking too much of guys who can only go 4 or 5 innings at most, and players who have to play, versus lefties or righties only, or are in there for their defense versus their bats. Like the Orioles are pretty good at like compensating. Like I think they've shown that even before they peaked, like they were surprised partially because they were able to mix and match and play good defense and play good run prevention when they didn't really have the kind of star power offensively or in the rotation. So I do like their problem solving abilities. I just wonder if like the top end talent is ultimately going to win out. So that's why I think I'll lean Yankees, but all it takes is I think one player coming back or one player getting injured to tilt the scales.
when you look at lengthier trends, since June 1st, the Yankees are only one game above 500. And since July 1st, the Orioles, and we were recording this before they play the Dodgers, are 2 games below 500. So it's not like either team has been red hot over a lengthy part of time. Both teams started out tremendously hot, late March through May, but since June, not so hot for the Yankees and the Orioles. Something that caught my attention when looking at the American League East. And these two teams will be playing against each other. They have one more series this year. Baltimore at New York, September 24th through the 26th. That's a Tuesday through Thursday series. That also covers the White Sox final homestand. So if you're like me, you're at White Sox games, but have the Orioles and Yankees on your MLB.TV app on your phone watching that game, I wouldn't blame you, because that's probably what I will be doing. And then finally, the National League wild card. You have the Diamondbacks and the Padres still have a comfortable lead as a 4th and 5th seeds. The Diamondbacks are 2.5 games ahead of the last spot on the National League wild card. The Padres are just a game back of the Diamondbacks. But here come the Atlanta Braves. The Braves are 8-2. They have a 3-game winning streak. They're 5 games behind Philadelphia. That might be too many games to catch up on the Phillies in the final month. We talked about the Mets. The Mets are 3.5 games back of the Braves, and they're facing the White Sox this weekend. And in the distance, the Chicago Cubs, they're 5.5 games back. They're 68 and 66. Unfortunately, they don't have any more games against the White Sox left. But the Cubs are red hot again. They have won 7 of their last 10 games. James, how do you see the National League wildcard shaking out? Do you still see the standard before entering September that it'll still be Diamondbacks, Padres, or Braves? Or do you see someone upsetting one of those 3 teams to sneak into the postseason?
I'm very overly bullish on the Diamondbacks. They have not done it in the way that I anticipated, since I was literally seeing the article before I submitted my predictions away from predicting Jordan Lawler a Rookie of the Year. I also probably anticipated more effective starts from Merrill Kelly, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Jordan Montgomery when I picked them as a sleeper World Series pick. And I also certainly didn't appreciate Corbin Carroll being a dead body for half of a season when I predicted him as the NL MVP. But finally, they're off and running, and so I'm going to be bullish on them. The Braves have this fun young upstart rotation with this young Ronaldo Lopez and Chris Sale. Exciting guys. I'm excited. I'm really intrigued to see what they can do in the game. They're fun to watch. Just the sort of people you want to lock up for a long time, and really pay whatever is necessary to make them part of your core. Exceptional talents. Did you know that the pitcher with the least number of barrels allowed all season, the one and only Aaron Bummer? I think surely somebody's going to be able to channel that sinker's profile into reliable elite production. Why wouldn't the Braves be the organization to do it? So yeah, just very, very bullish on everything they got going on there. If there's the next White Sox there that I've forgotten who's doing well, please tell me so I can also pretend to have just heard a little bit.
Do you count Jesse Chavez? Speaking of young upstarts.
I do. Someone who, was cast off in spring training, even though if the track record kind of speaks for itself, and look at him proving all the haters and losers wrong once more.
Hey, I wanted him on the team just so there was somebody older than me on the White Sox roster.
I think that's very valid. Seeing players retire at 34, very distressing. Seeing obviously toast 29-year-olds, not something I enjoy as a 37-year-old. So Jesse Chavez, great job.
If the Mets overtake any of those teams, they would have earned it. Their last 10 games of the regular season, 4 at home against the Philadelphia Phillies, 3 on the road at Atlanta, and they finished the season at Milwaukee. That is a very tough 10-game stretch for any team, but especially to end the season. The Mets have 7 games left against the Phillies, which is a surprise with the way the schedule's been working out, and they have 3 more games against the Atlanta Braves. So I think the Mets have the best chance if they're going to upset any of those three teams. If it's not the Braves because they break down again and they suffer one more injury, I could see the Mets sneaking in, and at least the Braves have a built-in excuse of why they would not have made the postseason. So I'll be the bold one, and I will say this is the weekend that launches the Mets seriously into the wild card. And we have a wild finish in the National League East as the Phillies faded a little bit from their red-hot start to start the season as the Braves and Mets close that gap. Because I can't imagine this Mets team with their ownership group missing the postseason again.
Can't believe in anything anymore.
And on that note, that would be a great way to end this podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube, which if you do listen to us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. We greatly appreciate it at youtube.com/SoxMachine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. Follow James at JR Fegan. He'll be at the games again covering the White Sox and the Mets. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. To gain full access to our coverage of the Chicago White Sox and help support our endeavor of covering a historical team, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. Monthly plans start at $5. You get ad-free versions of both the podcast and website with that subscription. We also have additional tiers of support if you'd like to join a monthly Zoom call with Jim and James, or if you want to be part of our Veterans Committee and be part of the group chat where James gives us additional information and insight on what he is hearing from the White Sox clubhouse, you can go to patreon.com/SoxMachine to inquire and sign up today. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.